Hello, hello, hello. It is me, your True Hill Phenom SP3. We are back once again with episode 2, season 1 of Dark Side of the Ring. I am back once again with the princess of all the True Hills, Miss Chrissy Love.
Hello, hello, hello.
And our special guest has become a permanent guest for our season 1 reviews as he joins us for episode 2, the resident True Hill alcoholic top guy, JJ.
Hell yeah! Listen, I wasn't missing this one. This one, I was. This one, I was not missing. There might be one or two I missed, but this one, nah, not this one.
So season 1, episode 2 is the story revolving around one of wrestling's most infamous moments, most infamous scenes in wrestling history, the Montreal Screwjob. This covers the big dispute between Vince McMahon and Bret the Hitman Hart as he left the WWF to go to WCW, and Vince screwed him over to get the title off of him. So before we get into anything, this is your little quick reminder. Push that like button. We want to make this one of our most liked videos for our Dark Side of the Ring reviews. You guys went all out and made our the final days of Owen Hart our most liked video for the Dark Side of the Ring reviews. So let's make Bret beat Owen one more time. So
That's so wrong.
At the iCard bottom up below, push that subscribe button and push the bell to stay notified for more True Hill heat. So, Miss Chrissy Love, I will kick it over to you. This must have been a very hard one for you to watch since your hatred of Bret the Hitman Hart.
Not really. Not at all. Me being the Sean lover that I am, no, this was not hard to watch. However, I did need to understand and go back and watch and listen to what were the days and things that led up to this main day and event at Survivor Series. So that was what I was doing basically.
So what was your thoughts on the overall documentary before we go through the timeline, JJ?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, it was one of those things. Again, like I know we've talked about a lot of things that has been so vivid in our memories, and this is definitely it. This is one of those. Like this is the ones that I would never forget as far as where I was.
Yeah.
What was I doing? What was I feeling at the time? And this just gives you a deeper look into it, and really. There's been multiple things covering this thing, and this is just another one of those things that is covering it. But I think that for a new wrestling fan, that this is something that would give you quite a bit of insight. But this was not as non-objective with this viewing compared to other viewings of the Montreal Screwjob.
I think like the WWE has covered it ad nauseum, but they do it from the WWE revisionist point of view. So this was very much needed. So off the bat, before I kick it over to Chrissy Love and go through the timeline, I'll tell you guys, the viewers, this is not the worst episode of Dark Side of the Ring. Brawl for All added nothing. It literally, Brawl for All was literally talking about one of the worst angles in history and then did a version of this episode. So I can't say this episode is worse than that one.
That's what I was trying to tell you before. I was like, there's no way that this episode is as far. They don't even compete near each other. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think he was only saying that in the sense that there has been multiple things covering this, and then we learned so much from other versions of covering this compared to what we got out of this one. But if you've never seen any of these before, this would give you a lot of insight.
Yeah, I mean, me, myself, I didn't learn anything from the episode when I first watched it or when I rewatched it for this, but this was definitely an entertaining episode for sure. So, Chrissy Love, start us off from the beginning. How did this go down?
It starts off where we are going to Canada, and we are at Bret Hart's home, and it speaks with the boy wonder himself, as you all love him and call him, you guys, the best there is, the best there was. I don't need to go on that spiel anymore.
The excellence of execution.
What is that for?
Giving you the glasses.
Giving you
But he is the main storyteller. He's the person that we sit down and we understand what was the whole deal of that memorable day in Canada in his hometown of that day at Survivor Series. And then we bring in our other players. It definitely just shows you like how he was when he first got to the WWE, where it was bought by Vince. Canadian Stampede, was it Canadian Stampede, JJ?
Canadian Stampede Wrestling, yeah.
Canadian Stampede Wrestling, which was
Calgary,
owned by his
Calgary,
dad.
Calgary Stampede.
Calvary Stampede. Sorry, see, this is why I have my boys with me. But it tells you how Jim. We have our boy Jim Cornette come in, and he tells us that Stu Hart is like the leader, or the one that always show all these guys how to wrestle in his infamous dungeon, and all his boys were wrestlers. All the daughters married wrestlers, and it shows how even these football players would come and they would train in his dungeon, and he would have them crying like little babies. And
Stu
his
Hart
son
is the godfather of all Canadian wrestling.
He is. There you go. That's a great name for it. All Canadian wrestlers have studied or got some type of form of teaching through that man. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir.
Yeah, and whether you went through the dungeon or not, you probably came across someone from the dungeon that taught you something. So
Correct.
whether you went through the dungeon, you got to get stretched by Stu or not, one way or another, a lot of Canadian wrestlers such as Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Lance Storm, they have all gone through the dungeon or been taught by Stu Hart.
Wonderful. Then we get that once Vince now buys their territory in Canada, he now receives these wrestlers, which is Bret Hart and his brother-in-law, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and they're brought in as a tag team.
As well as the Dynamite Kid with British Bulldog.
Yes, absolutely. I apologize. Yes, see, this is why we have you there. That
trying to monopolize the game from the fucking 80s, like the Jesus Christ.
That created the whole big conglomerate that was the WWF at the time. He bought all those different territories, whether it was Georgia, whether it was North Carolina, or even in Canada, and that's what formed the huge talent roster that he had at the beginning of the WrestleMania era.
Then it just shows like the progression of how Bret's career goes on after he leaves as a tag team, and they're like wondering like who should be champion. They see their other competition. They have Ric Flair, and they're like, who should we put our belt on? And as Jim Cornette says, the belt is the champion is decided by none other than Mr. Vince McMahon. You don't have this big old brawl and this big old thing to like compete. He'll tell you who is going to get the belt, and that's how.
I like how Jim kind of explained like the whole kayfabe and like he's a wrestling historian, so he kind of explains how like kayfabe, how you kind of have to stay in the wrestling world. That the kayfabe world is the term that they use for in wrestling, like not to call it fake, not to call it real, but there's kayfabe and not kayfabe.
Yes. And he was very well. We'll get on to where he was really upset about where kayfabe was like shown to the fans. But it shows that how Vince decided maybe we should put Bret as our champion. He's a great wrestler. He's been the company guy. He's been here, and he then decides to make him as the champion. Anything else you want to say, JJ?
I mean, he was recognized as he was a great worker, and as obviously a counterpunch to what the other company was doing over there, since they had already started to lose a lot of their big players. This was in WWF was in big transition where they lost their mega stars. They're losing their big guys. So it's like who they're gonna put the belt on, and the obvious choice would have been somebody like the Undertaker, but you need other champions. you need somebody else. So Bret Hart was an easy choice, and this was something that Bret Hart took with a lot of pride. He took this becoming champion. He took this feeling like he was a champion. And, the decision was to make him champion, but he felt like he deserved to be champion. And this was kind of the start of where the conflicting opinions have started to dwell in a little bit. And
I think that's where like Jim added a lot, kind of explaining how like he like Bret has a different like kind of thing with kayfabe. Like he feels that everything is real because he presents himself in such a realistic way, and he's such a great worker. He actually believed a lot of the stuff that he was being told. He
Doing, yep.
believed he was the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. He believed he was the excellence of execution. So a
Yep.
lot of that had to do with that. And I think they also mentioned the big like breakout performance for him against British Bulldog at SummerSlam 1992, which he main evented and sold out Wembley Stadium, which gave Vince McMahon the confidence to be like, okay, this guy can
Maybe,
carry the
yeah.
company. And that's why I think that he was a much better choice than someone like The Undertaker, because they never felt like The Undertaker needed the title. They literally just gave The Undertaker the title in his first year to kind of give him legitimacy. And then from there, they really waited like 7 more years before they gave him his second.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just think in the hand, creating more than one champion, which the Undertaker, I believe, was obviously the obvious choice because he was their biggest thing, and he's a big guy, so wrestling's always wanting the big guys to be the champions, and having other options, and Bret Hart was a really good option. They were grooming Shawn Michaels into being that champion, so they were recovering from losing their megastars because they were used to having their giants as champions. They were used to having the big guys as champions. The only exceptions were really like Macho Man and Ric Flair. Right. So, they had and obviously they're both in WCW already. So they need to create other champions. And I think Bret Hart was a really good option. Shawn Michaels is still being groomed. Undertaker, you got him in the bag. So let's see if we could build some other stars. And Bret Hart took that shit to heart. Like Bret Hart was like, I'm the best. and
he never turned it off.
And then once the contract started to come into play, it's just now, this is where entertainment and sports become different, because this is now we're publicizing you as our talent and you not being our best player on the court. This is us giving you the opportunity, but now how do you negotiate this? And how do you tell a talent, we're making you the best, but you're not the best?
Right.
So,
I mean, I think in my eyes at that time, Bret Hart was the best wrestler in the world. So it wasn't like he was believing his own hype. He was actually proving it, in my opinion. Yeah. So I can get where the line kind of gets distorted to
totally
him.
Get it. Yeah, totally.
So
I mean, he deserves to be paid, as the champion, and he was the champion, and he was doing all these matches, headlining and traveling all over the world, like rightfully so. Give me what I am supposed to be owed. Nothing wrong with that.
He got a very, very lengthy contract too. I believe it was 20 years. They was gonna give him a damn near 20-year contract, but that obviously wasn't. It wasn't, huh?
I think it was for 1.5.
Yeah, and just they didn't have the financial backings.
I mean, he did sign it, right? He signed a contract, and then after a while, they was like, "Hey, we know what?
We gotta pull back.
We gotta pull back on this." So then he started shopping around, and he got,
Yeah, his contract was set to expire. His contract
that was in 1996 is when he re-signed the extension. This was after he just put over the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels for his first WWF title run, and Bret felt like he had proven himself. He was a draw in the UK, in Europe, in Canada. He had been a better draw than Diesel, that's for sure. So
that's a fact. That is a definite fact.
So Bret felt like he earned that contract. He signed the contract with Vince. Vince felt like he was, repaying him for his loyalty to the company. But this was at a time where WWF financially was not in a good space. They were losing money at a hard volume. The WCW were whooping their ass in the ratings with the NWO angle. So it was a whole bunch of things that caused Vince to go back to Bret and say, I think we have to take this contract away, which, like you said, Chrissy, it brought him to shop himself around. And that brings us into another talking head that contributed to this documentary, Mr. Eric Bischoff.
Mr. Bischoff, brought in and gives his side of like, hey, he had tried to get Bret over before. And he was talking to Bret before and he wanted to bring him, but Bret had declined. So now is the point where it's an opportune time where he's taken all of their big dogs, such as Scott Hall, Nash, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man. All these guys have all left and all went over here. So he was like, yeah, sure. Why not bring him on over? And it came to a point where it was like, all right, fine, my last day is this day, but I want to go out on a bang. I want to go out as champion in my homeland, and this is what
Well, I
should
don't think it
happen.
was more that. That brings us to the next side of the story, which is the
Mm-hmm.
issues between Bret the Hitman Hart and the Heartbreak Kid
Oh yes,
Shawn
I went too fast. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
so
Brett and Sean very much had this type of competitive type of relationship where both guys wanted to be the number one guy. And Sean at the time was a little bit of a loose cannon
He
and
was
was
drinking. He was
a
doing
lot
a
of
lot of stuff.
drug use, a lot of sex in locker rooms. So, Top Guy JJ, you were a fan at the time. How did you see it from like the on-screen perspective, and then everything that you've learned over the years about the whole animosity between Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels and Bret the Hitman Hart at this time, especially?
so it was weird because I was like a fan of both of them, obviously. So I'm that those are my two favorites. And after seeing the match at WrestleMania 12, I was like, all right, they got some mutual respect for each other. But then all of a sudden, you have Shawn Michaels taking jabs at Bret Hart.
Hmm.
He's taking these personal jabs at Bret Hart, talking about these sunny days. And then you have Bret Hart now also rebuttaling about the posing for Playgirl. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on. Like they're going under the belt now. This is not stuff that involves wrestling anymore. So they now it's kind of materializing into something very personal, like an actual hatred for each other,
Hmm.
which led into when his contract was starting to run out and Bret was going to have this closeout conversation with Shawn Michaels. Bret Hart, I thought, was very respectful in attempting to have this conversation with Shawn, but Shawn took all of these back and forth things so personal, he wanted nothing to do with this conversation with Bret Hart, and then they got into a scuffle in the locker room. So
Well, they got
then,
And,
they got into the scuffle after the
yeah,
Sunny
so
Days
yeah,
line.
it was
yeah,
like
because
that.
basically
Shawn,
he
that's
had Brett had asked Sean, "Do you mind if I talk about your Playgirl issue?" And he's like,
yeah,
he
no,
posed a Playgirl, and I didn't think it was, I would have never done anything like that, trying to be this like clean cut guy, and he, trying to talk about Sean, and
He
Sean,
is.
oh please,
yeah,
whatever.
but
He
he said
Anyway,
he,
is. He is.
but he got the old,
The Sunny Days line was Sean trying to put his own guilt on Brett. Like he was the one that was
it was
piping
putting
Sunny,
it
not
funny.
Brett.
Not
he was
Brett,
just,
yeah. And Jim
yeah,
Cornette said that for no, was it Bruce? No, Bruce Pritchard said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bruce and Brett said that. Bruce and Brett was like, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Sean that was the one that was with Sonny. And but it's like Sean, the thing is that Sean shouldn't have said to Brett to begin with that it was okay to talk about that.
Right.
Like he shouldn't
Yeah.
have. He should have literally just been like, nah, I'm not cool with that, because you're gonna tell a man he's cool with it, then he goes out there, he's a professional wrestler, so he's gonna oversell it, and he's
Hmm.
gonna be extra dramatic with it. So now he's coming back to the locker room with it, and then Sean is now upset, like he's teary eyed, he's hurt, and now his comeback is like deeply personal.
Hmm.
His comeback
Hey,
is deeply personal. He just got
trying to
has
ruin a
basically
man's marriage.
basically
Yeah, he
tries
got
to
a
ruin his
whole. I'm
marriage
trying
and making
to
shit up.
mess up people happy homes.
So
One note that I feel that they missed out, especially with bringing this whole Sean versus Brett animosity together, is these guys didn't even really have animosity before WrestleMania 12. They had a
No.
great match at WrestleMania 12, and then Sean, being the egomaniac that he is, literally, and it's been said by Brett in his autobiography, been said by Sean in his autobiography. Earl Hebner has also talked about it. When Sean grabs the belt at WrestleMania 12, which is one of my favorite happiest moments in wrestling history, he
Yeah.
screams out to Brett and to the referee, "Get him the fuck out of my ring." That's where it starts. That's where the start. That's the spark that starts this whole animosity between these two men.
Sean
I'm gonna
and
have to
she
go rewatch it.
and Sean. Listen, Sean was on one back then. Like
I must say, Sean. Everyone
Sean,
said Sean was a jerk back then. Everyone has. Oh, not everyone is all lying. Everyone is not going to tell the same lie.
and that's
Sean
obviously
even
our
says
favorite.
it.
Yeah, I
Right.
favored, and I was a big fan, and that's why I favored Brett a little bit more in this situation, because it's how much shit can you take from a young kid that you're trying to help him, but he's being so ungrateful with you helping him. He's literally like, here, I'm taking this from you and telling you fuck you at the same time. It's extremely disrespectful. So it's like, yo, Bret is like, nah, I'm not helping this fucking guy out. Like, I'm not helping him out. Like, now my contract is about to run out. I'm not handing him the fucking belt. I'm not losing to him to close out my time in the WWF. Y'all better find another solution because I'm not losing to him.
Like that, we have to tell like the whole story because I felt like they missed out, like really kind of like digging into it deep because
Right,
it's a
I
whole
feel like-
timeline with Shawn and Bret because of that whole scene at WrestleMania 12. Then WWF comes up with the plan for Bret versus Shawn 2 at WrestleMania 13 with Shawn as the champion and Bret as the challenger for Bret to get his win back, and then Shawn loses his smile and has a knee injury that takes him out for a number of months. It was only 2. like, Shawn kept digging and digging and digging at Bret. Even when Bret decides he wants to leave the company, he talks about this in the episode. He says he's gonna leave the company. Vince tells him he wants him to drop the title to Shawn in Montreal. He was not too sure about it, but he's a professional, so he goes to Shawn. He says, "Yeah, here we're working in Montreal." Yeah. He was like, "I know we've had animosity, but you don't have to worry about anything. I wouldn't do anything like that to you." And then Shawn responds with, "You can't expect the same from me." What?
He was an asshole back then, guys. I'm sorry. I can't, you know.
And then you wonder why I chose a side. This is the shit that we experience. Like, what? I'm trying to come in here and be respectful to you, and you ain't getting no respect out of me. Like, yo, I'm about to fuck you up. You saying some shit like that? That's what fueled it.
It's true. That was a spark that starts everything. So for the weeks building up to Survivor Series, they are basically trying to come up with a finish to this matchup because Bret, being angered by Shawn's response, decides that he is not going to drop the title to Shawn especially in his home country of Canada in Montreal. So they talk
like, why would I drop my belt in my hometown, on my homeland?
To a guy who doesn't respect me.
To him. To him. Like, to him? Nah.
Right. It's one thing if I have no problem dropping the belt. However, I'm in my homeland, and now you want me to drop to a person that I cannot even stand? That's too red flags. There's no way. And I kind of understand what he said by then. Like, that you kind of put me up against, you put my back against the wall. Like, how would you want me to do this? Like, can I just win and just give it back to you on Monday? Like.
But it's like, and even Bret came up with replacing Shawn with Ken Shamrock. He said he was open to dropping the title to Ken Shamrock, but Vince was like, no, it has to be Shawn.
This was one of those times where
why though?
It's kind of one of those times where it's like you gotta see both sides of the field. It's like the company had the plan for Shawn Michaels to carry the company into the new year, into the next WrestleMania.
Right.
But you got to understand why Bret Hart has a problem with this, because this kid has disrespected him for over a year. And it's like, and then this made it the worst when he's on his way out. And it's like, no, this is not, you're not going to sit here and pussy me out of this company. Like, I've been carrying this shit for a number of years, and you just going to, like, here, like, close the door on my ass on the way out and tell me fuck you at the same time? No.
Right.
Not happening.
And I think talking about and breaking down the whole matchup and story, I feel like the best contributors to this was Bret the Hitman Hart, of course, giving his first-person analysis of what happened on the night, but also Bruce Pritchard. Because Bruce Pritchard did great in this episode, but if you guys haven't, you two or anyone watching has not heard it before, go out of your way to listen to Something to Wrestle with about the Montreal Screwjob with Bruce Pritchard, where he breaks down everything. He is Vince McMahon's right-hand man, and he did not know the Screwjob was going to happen.
Oh, he was pissed. Oh, he was pissed about that. He's like, so everybody, when this job happens, is going to come to me believing that I know what's going on, and I had no idea what happened. The only people that knew what was going to happen was Vince McMahon, Earl Hebner, and Shawn Michaels.
And Triple H.
And
And
Triple H,
Triple
Triple H,
H.
and
Triple
Triple
H
H,
has
Triple
come
H,
out
And
many of
Triple H,
times
of
and
course,
said that he
Triple
was one
H.
of the people that told him, if Brett's not going to do business with us, then we'll do business ourselves. Fuck him.
also Cornette and Russo. They knew what was gonna happen.
I was gonna get to them. I think
We was gonna get to them. Yeah, we
their
gonna get to them.
contribution is after we break
Yeah,
down
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened on the
Those
night.
two.
So the footage of the matchup. It's honestly, in my opinion, outside of Survivor Series 1992, it's Brett and Sean's best match. It's
Mm.
much better than the Iron Man match because it's non-stop action. These guys go at it with a hatred and an animosity that was unlike anything else. Like they were barely in the ring for this matchup. This match went
It
all
started off.
around the
It went. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like a good 15 minutes. They were not even inside of the ring, and then the match started.
So
Yeah.
Brett discusses how the talking backstage with Vince went. Of course, this is at the time where Brett is filming the documentary on A&E. So he actually wears his mic into the conference with Vince McMahon talking about it. So Vince tells him that they're just gonna have some type of schmoz finish where Triple H and China come out, British Bulldog and Owen Hart come out, and it's a whole big no contest. The show ends in chaos, and then we can do the angle tomorrow night where you drop the title. But of course, that wasn't the plan to Vince. Involving in this plan, he does tell Brett that before the no contest finish, Sean is going to put the sharpshooter on him, which was his first mistake. That he allowed any type of submission to be held on him. That was the problem. But this brings me to the MVP of this episode, in my opinion, Mr. Earl Hebner. Earl Hebner breaking down like his whole point of view and what happened to him on that day. Him talking about Brett giving him a first class seat to Montreal and basically sitting him down next to him and saying like, they're gonna try to ask you to screw me tomorrow. And Earl swears on the life of his family that he will not do that to Brett. Then we get to the day Earl's about to go through the curtain and Gerald Briscoe grabs him by the arm and tells him, yeah, when Sean puts the hold on Brett, you ring the damn bell. He was like, what are you talking about? He was like, I can't do that to Brett. He was like, does Bret Hart sign your checks?
and that'll change up a person's move right away. Sorry, I got bills to pay.
Especially during that time, but those are the two things that really meant a lot, especially 23 years ago. It's like, yo, your word meant everything. And now you're about to literally be in the same vicinity with him and then go back on that very thing that you promised him. And it's, Scott Hall makes me sick. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Scott Hall is among the talking heads. Yeah, I was gonna wait to bring him towards the end when we talk about the final question that was asked during this. But basically, what happens? Sean puts the sharpshooter on Brett. Vince McMahon and a bunch of officials are at ringside. Vince tells the timekeeper to ring the bell. Earl signals for the bell, and Bret Hart has been screwed. We see the scene of Bret coming up to his feet and spitting in Vince's face. We see Shawn Michaels acting as if he is surprised and he is shocked by this display. We see Bret Hart with the WCW signal. He did it in reverse because he said he had to know that it had to show.
Yeah, he did it in reverse. Yes.
We also see Bret tearing up the ringside area, destroying monitors and the announce table, and then we get we hear his account of the scene in the locker room. He's in the locker room with the rest of the Hart Foundation. Rick Rude is there. He said he's in like a towel. He's about to go in the shower, and Vince McMahon comes in, and he tells Vince, he points at him, and he tells him, if you are still here when I come out the shower, I'm gonna knock you on your ass.
Now, was that right? Now, was that right before or after when they were getting changed in the locker room where
he spoke to Sean?
Straight up asked Sean, did you have anything to do with it?
He spoke to Sean after he punches out Vince. He because Sean is still in the locker room and he's acting all destroyed. He asks him like, "Did you have nothing to do with it?" And Sean's like, "No, I swear, I swear,
my hands are clean. You fucking liar."
Damn, guys, y'all, wow.
Yes, he is. It is what it is. So
he is a lot. It is bad. It's bad, especially like they have footage. Like we can hear you. We got the tapes. Like you did that, son. Like you knew.
Exactly.
Even if you didn't
So,
know till like 5 minutes before the match, you knew. Come on.
so we see the reenactment of Brett coming out the shower. He says that once he's done tying his boots, he's gonna get up and he's gonna knock Vince on his ass. Vince is still staying there. Vince tells apparently according to Bruce Pritchard, Vince
Bruce told him to
told
go
his
there.
officials, Shane and everybody, he's like, don't stop him. Let him get this in. He deserves this for all the hard work that he's given to us. So Brett puts his shoes on. He gets up. He has no shirt on. He grabs Vince by the shirt, hawks back, and hits him right in the jaw and lays Vince right down on his
The
ass.
way
Tells,
the way Brett explained that felt so. It must have felt so gratifying. He's like, I hit him
Beat up your
with
boy.
one of the sweetest uppercuts. It felt so good and so gratifying. And Bruce said, "You gotta take this. You gotta take this." Like he prepared him. Listen, you gotta give.
Bruce, you gotta do this.
You gotta take this. You gotta eat this one.
Bruce told him
Gotta
that, like,
eat
you gotta
this one.
let him get it out because it's you screwed him.
And Brett sounded so gratified explaining how he uppercutted him and knocked him off his feet. And it was just like, wow, yeah, that's how you blow off some steam.
I loved it. Yeah, that was probably my favorite part of this whole episode is Brett explaining how he punched Vince McMahon. He knew every single detail. Of like 25, 26 years later, he knew every single detail of that. That's amazing.
Still to this day, he probably still don't remember it.
Because that's probably the sweetest punch he has ever hit in his life. He probably directly connected it like how Ken hits a fucking all-you-can. Like, bop! And just, that shit must have felt great.
He loved it. So that brings us to the next side of the story, which is Brett going over to WCW. This brings us to Eric Bischoff kind of talking about how he felt that Brett he wasn't all there, that Brett was emotionally dead inside due to his time at WWE and what they did to him with the Montreal Screwjob, that he got a shell of the Hitman himself. It doesn't excuse the shitstorm that was Bret Hart's run in WCW.
How long was he there? Like 2 years, maybe?
Fuck out of here. He was brought into WCW and he is introduced to WCW. And his first act on becoming an active member of the WCW's roster is to become a fucking referee.
He's a special guest referee for who's match?
A referee?
Eric Bischoff versus Larry Sabisco, and then they did the whole angle at the end of Sting and Hogan, where Hogan is supposed to screw Sting, but Nick Patrick counts the count regularly, and then Brett basically screws Hulk Hogan.
This man just main evented Survivor Series, and you're gonna ask him to debut in a brand new company with a new contract to be a referee? You killed him before he even started.
Well, he said that too. His run there was like obsolete. It was nothing. It wasn't. He was like, all right, if this is what you want me to do, I'm gonna do it. But I didn't think that was. Yeah, right. He didn't even like that he had to enter as a referee. Like he was like, what is it like?
Literally, it's one of those things where it's like, yo, the grass just was not greener on the other side. Like there was not. It was just not better. Like he left one shitstorm to go to a bigger shitstorm.
But the whole thing, their whole MO was just to get another big player from their competitor. That's really what it was.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sad that Brett couldn't contribute to the final days of Owen Hart documentary, because I felt like that was one piece of this whole story that was kind of missing from this episode.
Me too.
And that Brett could have talked about it more, because I have heard it before from many of people, and I would love to hear you guys' opinion on this before we kind of wrap things up and talk about the final few segments. Do you believe that Owen Hart would have had to do that stunt if Bret Hart was still with WWF?
No, absolutely not. I don't think so.
I don't think the Blue Blazer would have been in existence if Bret
Hart was still. I think they still would have had their whole crew all together, probably.
I don't think the Blue Blazer would have even existed, honestly.
Yeah. Wouldn't have been a question. Like why are we bringing the Blue Blazer back?
Because he would have questioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that Team Canada was strong as fuck.
It was strong. It was like
like it was like
Foundation, yeah.
one thing.
it would have disintegrated, but Brett would have looked at him and said, "You're so much better than this. You're
Mhm.
not covering your face, and you're not being some gimmick hero. You're probably a better wrestler than I am."
We would have actually got a conclusion to the whole Hart
Yeah.
Foundation and Brett's anti-American thing if he stayed with the company. But it's just sad to kind of think about stuff like that. But it was a interesting question that I wanted to hear you guys' opinion. So that brings us to our
He
last
probably
couple
thinks
of
about that himself.
I think that brings us to our last couple of talking heads and last couple of topics. They talk about the end of Brett's career with WCW receiving the kick from Goldberg that gave him a concussion that ended his career. And then we move over to Mr. Jim Cornette back again and a new arrival, Vince Russo, who wasn't even supposed to be a part of this episode. He says it himself.
He begged to be a part of it because he had to give his side of the story, supposedly.
So they
Bro,
talk about the meeting at this house where they discuss the finish and how to deal with the finish of Brett versus Shawn. We hear Jim Cornette talking about the history of professional wrestling and how there was a screw job in the 1800s. And that's how he came up with the idea. And Vince Russo saying that, you know, the shock factor, you got to use the reality, bro. So what did you guys think about Cornette and Russo making this episode about their shameless rivalry that has lasted more than 20 years? Top guy, JJ?
fucking annoying. Like fucking annoying. Like literally, like it felt like once the episode literally just drifted into them two.
Yeah.
Once they started getting into back and forth about the conversation, because I think they literally completely forgot what they were asked about and literally just started bullshitting each other. Talking about, I'm the one that pitched the idea, bro. And yo, I wasn't in the room when that thing. I shut the fuck. Why is this even in the episode?
Yeah,
It was just like
I said the same thing.
none of this dialogue made no sense. I was like, why? Just why? Just so y'all could shamelessly plug y'all hatred for each other? Like it was like, nah. That shit. This whole episode could have went on a little bit more about speaking about what happened with them, with the actual shit between Brett and Shawn, instead of sitting here glorifying two fucking fossils that can't stand each other. Like it was like that was a nice 5 to 10 minutes that they could have used to speak about those things that SP referred to earlier in the show, to give us more detail about the inner pieces of what happened and to talk about that bullshit.
Yeah.
That shit was aggravating.
How about you, Miss Chrissy?
This episode, this documentary, it has like its up and down. But then once those two guys come, Cornette and Russo, it kind of goes down for me because it's like, it's not about you guys. No one cares what you guys have to say. I think they gave them too much shine and too much time to say how much they hate each other. Like, it's not about you. The whole point of it is to give the perspective of what happened that night in Montreal. That's really what it is. Like, we don't need you guys. We already know, everyone knows that you guys can't stand each other. We don't need you guys on this platform to use it to show how much you guys hate each other.
They took one of the biggest wrestling stories and turned it into a fucking promo on each other.
Right.
Like,
that's what they tend to do, it seems.
But they love the business.
Right.
But they love each other more.
And they're all at Vince's house, and they're going back and forth. And Vince is like, "What are you gonna do?" I mean, I don't even know what. So, they're all liars, to be honest. I don't give a shit. Like, they're all fucking liars. Like, let's just call it what it is. They're all liars.
That seems very accurate, but that brings us to the final kind of question, or the topic that the talking heads talked about, is that to this day, 23 years later, there are still some people in the business or professional wrestling fans who believe the Montreal Screwjob was a work, including WWE Hall of Famer, the artist formerly known as Razor Ramon, as Miss Chrissy is wearing, Mr. Scott Hall. Yep. So what do you guys think about Scott Hall still claiming that the screw job was a work, even rewatching it as he is in the documentary, and him saying that, oh no, the camera zoomed in on Brett for the WCW sign. Yeah, it's got to be a work.
Well, yeah, that's what they want. They want ratings. Of course, something big just happened. Of course, they're gonna zoom in to see what happened. Like, his face looked all distraught and like surprised. Even Sean looked almost somewhat surprised once he like gets up. He's still like on the ground, and what's his name is standing up. Like, I don't think it was a work. I don't.
Top guy JJ.
I saw this and I was like, Razor, you're a fucking idiot. And
Yeah.
I think it, and I was like, you know what, and I was like, you're an idiot, but it's like I kind of can't blame how you feel because you've seen so many works. You've been a
Right.
part of a work that lasted
Yeah.
months. Like you were bought into WCW, you were hired there, but you worked an angle as an invader for months. So your first initial thing was a work to like a shoot work. So all you see and know is works. So everything you see and know are works. So you don't think that there's any realism to this. You don't think that there's anything like Razor Scott is fucking annoying. He's fucking annoying. What's annoying about him is it, but I was like, I can't be mad at him at the same time, but I was mad at him because it's like he was brought into WCW to work. Like it was a work. He came in on an invasion angle that was supposed to be real as these WWF invaders. He worked that angle for months. So he's been working shoot angles that's been works for pretty much the second half of his career. So he doesn't believe anything. So everything to the man is going to be a goddamn work. So he worked his life doing a work. And now he's looking at this and all he sees is a work being worked. And it's like, no, this involved elements. This involved, yes, Vince McMahon knew that all of this was going to happen. So he's in control of the camera people. So he's going to look for great TV. He wants Brett's reaction. He wants the aftermath of this. He put the camera on Brett for a reason because he's like, I want to see this son of a bitch's reaction when I screw him. Like, hell yeah, you're going to see that fucking reaction. And Sean looked not like he didn't know. He just looked like, I just can't believe we still went through with this shit.
Right.
Like, it was like we actually still went.
I think Sean's part was all a work.
Yeah,
Honestly,
but I think that there's like, I don't believe that he obviously knew, but it just kind of felt like he was still kind of like, yo, we actually really did this. Like, we really did this. Like, I'm not going to be sorry tomorrow, but we actually did this now.
Meanwhile,
like,
Earl Hebner has now left the building.
Live TV. Yeah, like this just happened on live TV.
Yeah, Earl Hebner dipped out so fast that he almost didn't beat out though Jim Cornette because Jim Cornette was so convinced that he came up with the idea that he decided he was gonna get out of there.
And just as convinced as Razor thinking that shit, he's like watching it. He's like, yeah, this is a work. Like, look at Brett's reaction. He gets that whole hawk, and then of course the camera shoots right on Vince. I mean, how is this not a work? Like, hell yeah, this is a work. And I'm like, yo, shut the fuck up. Like, you're really
dude, like it's very understandable that Kevin Dunn did not know that the Screwjob was happening. He probably thought it was a work. So that's why he's directing the camera. Zoom in on Vince. Oh my God, they're doing this cool angle. Zoom in on Vince. Zoom in on Brett. Oh, Brett is teasing that he's going to WCW. Oh my God, they didn't tell me about this angle. Like, this is cool. And then he's told by Vince later, nah, this was all real.
Yeah.
and I think Jim Cornette's follow-up was very wrong. I don't believe this would have worked out if they would have worked this out to be a work. It wouldn't have felt the same. It wouldn't have came off the same. If they would have worked this to be a work where Vince McMahon was the evil genius and this was all a plot and scheme, this wouldn't have felt authentic at all. And then Brett's send-off wouldn't have felt as heated as it was when he went to, like, it just would, it would have, we would have felt worked. It would have felt worked if they would have put their work hats on. Because they weren't that fucking creative back in 1997. I'm sorry.
So Miss Chrissy Love, any final thoughts or remarks on this episode before we end this video?
I just hope that I can still be around to see if Jim Cornette will pee on Vince Russo's grave.
I'm sure you won't be 98 years old in a wheelchair being crawled up there to see it, but I'm sure you will be alive. You will be alive. He said that he told his wife that, and if his wife doesn't do that, she is cut
It's
out of the
out
will.
of his will. Damn, you're like, even after death, he'll still cut her out. Maybe he got like 3 different wills just in case.
That hatred is real. But
Yo,
yes, that brings us to the end of episode 2, season 1, Dark Side of the Ring, the Montreal Screwjob. Post your comments down below and tell us what you thought about this episode. Did you think that it was one of the better episodes for season 1 or one of the weaker ones? Do you agree with us that they spent a little bit too much time on the Cornette versus Russo rivalry and not enough time on the real animosity between Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels and Bret the Hitman Hart? Let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, push the like button. It helps this channel grow and help other wrestling fans like yourself get exposed to this True Hill Heat content. And of course, push the iCard down at the bottom to subscribe and the bell to stay notified for all the great content right here. So up next for us, season 1, episode 3, it is the killing of Bruiser Brody. One of the most intense, emotional episodes of Dark Side of the Ring season 1 or season 2. Are you guys ready for that one?
yeah, this one is gonna be a tough one.
Yeah, this one was a high one for me for anger, but this one here that's coming up is gonna be like, wow, this is gonna appeal a lot of shit.
Yep.
This is a deep dive into what happened when Bruiser Brody went over to Puerto Rico and he never came back again. It is a very sad story, a very troubling story, but it is one you're going to definitely enjoy. So join us back next Wednesday for our episode 3, season 1, Dark Side of the Ring review. Of course, for the princess of all the True Hills, Miss Chrissy Love, for our resident True Hill alcoholic, Top Guy JJ. It is me, your True Hill Phenom SP3. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.